Hello, everyone. So, what I'm talking about today is the show what you know all those laws assignment, right? Now, what you have to do for this assignment is you're categorizing 9 different types of laws, right? Where you have to categorize them in economic, social, political, or environmental, right? Now, we're not just talking about what the law is, we're rather talking about what the consequences were and how that had an effect on American society. So the first thing you need to do when doing this assignment is you open up the categorizing laws document. Click it, and that should prompt you to download, right? Otherwise, you can also open it there if you want to do Word online. Either is fine. Okay, then you have your categorizing laws document, right? So what you need to do is you think about the impact of each law listed below and place each law below in the correct category: economic, social, political, and environmental, right? Then at the bottom, right, this question right here is most important. This is the question we have to answer. So let's take a look. The Homestead Act, right, 1862, Homestead Act, right? This was a political slash environmental, right? Remember, the Homestead Act was passed in 1862. It meant that if you lived in a certain area for 5 years and you paid a filing fee, you would get 160 acres. Well, this is going to expedite the process of manifest destiny. It also helped accelerate Western expansion and led to the degradation of Native American political areas. The Sherman Antitrust Act, right? This was passed during the Progressive Era / Gilded Age. Antitrust Act. Let's fix this. This was an economic law, right? It's one of the things that helps lead to the cessation of Standard Oil's exclusive monopoly on oil distribution, right? The Sherman Antitrust Act is going to help break up monopolies during the Gilded Age. Okay, the American Citizenship Act, American Indian Citizenship Act, right, passed in 1924. American Indian Citizenship Act passed in 1924. This would be a social law, right? It's also a political law. It's the first time the United States recognizes Native Americans as citizens of the greater United States. Okay, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act. This would also be this is also an example of a social law because this happened after World War II as GIs were reassimilating back into American society. We give them things like a quality house loan, education, and other veterans' benefits for their service in World War II. The Pendleton Act, right? The Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883 is a political law, right? It sets up specific criteria for you having to be qualified for your job, right? So that would be political. The Chinese Exclusion Act, that would be an example of a social or a political law. This was passed in 1882, and it prohibited Asian Americans, specifically Chinese Americans, from entering into the United States. The War Powers Act, right, passed in 1973. This was political. It basically puts some congressional holds on the president's ability to engage in a foreign war. This happens after Vietnam, when we realize that we need to rein in our capacity to make war. The Interstate Commerce Act, this would be economic. Right? And this was passed in, the 1887, I believe. right? And this was passed in order to help, again, stop the price gouging that happened from predatory tariffs put on freight cargo as it was being shipped across state lines. Then finally, we have the Pure Food and Drug Act. Right? This would be social. Okay, this was passed under the Roosevelt Agency. Right, we create the Food and Drug Administration, the Pure Food and Drug Act. Right, and this is a consequence of muckrakers like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, where we start to see clear witness testimony and evidence showing the incredibly abhorrent conditions of meatpacking. So then the next thing you need to do is you need to answer this. You would say something like, the law that, learn to spell, the law that had the most impact on American lives was the Pure Food and Drug Act. This, not DRG, drug. This law was passed in the early 20th century during the Roosevelt administration as a consequence of the muckraking work by Upton Sinclair. This law came into existence to ensure Americans were eating properly vetted food and companies were not exploiting us. This law had a social impact because it ensured Americans would be eating much more healthily. This was important